So would you guys help me with welcoming JV Dorsey this morning?
Good morning. Good morning. And the winner for the most ambiguous introduction ever is... That was fantastic. So good to be with you. How many, when you heard the name Queen, just felt like you totally got ripped off when you were named as a child? I was like, man, I could have been king or prince at least. That's a great name. It is so good to be with you this morning. And thank you for calling me a friend of Wyandotte Family Church. I definitely feel the same way. Great folks here. And I believe this is my third time here on a Sunday morning. And then, of course, we participated with you with the marriage retreat that you all do, and lots of good friends here. So it's really good to be with you. And I have to tell you that I'm actually, the reason I'm not gone vagrant or homeless, which is okay if I did, but I didn't. It's just that my family and I are on a month-long vacation right now. We take 3 weeks every summer. We took a month this summer. But when I heard that your incredible pastors, Pastor Jeremy and Julie, were going to be gone and needed some filling, I'm like, I can do that. And they said, and all you need to do is come and tell your story. So I am taking them at their word. That is literally all I'm doing this morning. And if there was a code in there that I was supposed to be doing something different, I missed it. So I'm going to do that, and definitely glad to be a part of that. They said be casual. Then they said choose one word to describe, and I was kind of on the spot. I had no idea what the word, I was Googling for good words to use, and I said, well, we'll just go with bigger. And then I looked at it and I said, why did I choose that word? I had no idea, but I was stuck with it at that point. So I thought, well, let me give a little bit of explanation to the way that I mean that word. How many know this is America, we like things big? Yep. Right, so I have an 80-pound sheepdog. It's actually a sheepadoodle, and his name is Herbert. His IQ is 6, and we bought him thinking this guy is going to be an amazing, he's going to be an amazing guard dog, he's going to be amazing fun, we're going to teach him tricks, we're going to just have an amazing time with this dog, and it turns out that he is dumber than a rock, and not only that, but he's petrified of every living creature. He was walking through our yard the other day. We had a turtle walking through our yard about this big. He went to sniff the turtle. This turtle nipped him on the nose. Now he is petrified of turtles and frogs and bugs and people outside our house. So he is absolutely worthless. So we have him on 4th of July weekend. We have him, and I promise I'm going to get to why I've chosen the word bigger. Well, how I'm going to use it. We had them on 4th of July weekend, and we were going to do fireworks. Let me know if we're going to do fireworks, we got to do them bigger, right? Especially than the neighbors. So we went down to the firework place, and we bought an embarrassingly large amount of fireworks. And we got ready to do the fireworks. Now, maybe you know this. I'm not real smart. How many knew that dogs don't like fireworks? Yeah, I didn't know this. See, y'all knew it, but I didn't know. So I'm here with my kids, and we're like, we've got Herbert, we've got hot dogs, we've got fireworks. We're going to light off the fireworks, and we light off, one of these little fountain ones, and it's fine. Herbert's like, oh, that's interesting, and he's looking at it. And then we light off one of these ones that can only be described as like a battery of missiles. It just shoots and lights, and it sounds like you're, in a dangerous place. And about 3 missiles in, we're in the middle of the woods. We're on about 150 acres, or whatever it is, and Herbert decides to just bolt into the woods because he's afraid he's going to be killed by the missiles. He has a leash on him, and it is 10:30 at night. At about 1 o'clock in the morning, we found him back in the middle of the woods, tied to a tree 5 times around with his little leash, just going, I'm going to die. So we rescue Herbert, our not real bright dog, take him inside, go to bed, but we have all these fireworks that are left. Now, I hope I'm not going to get in trouble. Y'all, did you know that it was a law? You can only do fireworks the day before and day after federal holiday? Again, another thing I did not know. So we're left with all these fireworks, and we decide last night, we didn't get arrested, but we decided last night that we're going to use these fireworks. And so we had the dog inside, lesson learned. We're getting ready to light off the fireworks, and bigger's better, right? So my wife decides to leave for a little bit, and the next thing you know, my kids have Roman candles tied in bundles of 5 and the blower out, and they're going to fire Roman candles and steer them with the wind blower. Because bigger's better. That's how we are as Americans. That is not what I mean by bigger. I didn't just choose the word to say, well, this is how amazing everything perhaps has meant. been in my life, but the reason I chose the word, the way I want to use that word, is that God, when He, at least in my story, and we all have our individual narratives that we're working with, in my story, that has been the trajectory of my life with God from the very beginning. That He has wanted to give me a bigger perspective on my own life, that He has wanted to give me a bigger sense of His love and His grace, a bigger perspective on how He does things and why He does things, and a bigger perspective on who His people are. So I was raised in the church, and if you are a child here this morning, you have an incredible good fortune of sitting under the teaching of Scripture and the influence of a godly community, which is incredible. But I was raised in church, and how many know, like the old saying used to be, being raised in church doesn't make you a Christian any more than being at McDonald's makes you a hamburger, right? That was definitely true for me. So for 19 years of my life, I literally went to church 2-3 times a week. Never once did it cross my mind to become a Christian. Never once. I was completely obsessed with myself. So I had a pretty normal upbringing, except for when I was born, my parents thought I was a girl for 3 days because it was before they had all the scans and everything. I had a fast heart rate, and if you have a fast heart rate, they tend to think you're a girl. Turned out I was just a spaz. So when I was born, I have 2 older brothers, 10 and 11 years older than me. They were sure I was going to be a girl. They had a girl's name picked out. I was Amanda for 3 days. It was the longest 3 days of my life, so much teasing. And then they decided to change my name, thankfully, to John Patrick. And then I was raised by these 2 older brothers. How many of the young ones in here, you have older siblings? You're a kid, you've got older siblings. How many of you that have older siblings, they give you the business sometimes? Mine did. When my parents would leave my brother and sister, my 2 brothers, to babysit me. And they would have competitions to see who could raise the biggest Charlie horse on one of my legs. So one would take the left leg, one would take the right leg. Then when somebody won, they got to give me a wedgie for good measure. Being the little brother, not all it's cracked up to be, right? So my parents would go on their date night, and I would go running across the front yard chasing their K car, saying, "Come back, come back, come back." And my parents were like, "Oh, he loves us." Well, I was terrified for my life that my brothers were going to destroy me while they were gone. So that was just sort of growing up. But the problem is that all during that growing up, my world was absolutely defined by one word, and that word was me. That I can still remember, I don't know if it was the first time or not, I was probably in 2nd grade. How many of you that are kids, you want friends? I want friends. How many that are adults want friends? I want friends. And I remember thinking to myself, there was this one kid, his name was Hondo. And he had lived in Japan, and he had all these cool toys from Japan he brought back with him. Everybody loved Hondo because they wanted to see his toys. And I thought, man, I got to get something that people want to see. 2nd grade logic, right? And I didn't have any money. I couldn't go to Japan, nothing like that. So I decided at 2nd grade, I'd take my little backpack and I would go to the local Eberhard shopping store and I would steal as much candy as I could and give away candy at school so the kids would like me. Turns out kids liked me. So I just kept stealing. I mean, there's a logical plan on the surface of it. But you can understand that it was defined by who? It was defined by me. Whatever I need to do to get people to like me, that will sounds like an idea and what I will probably go ahead and do. Fast forward a couple of years, I got my first paper route. Life is still all about me. How many realize that when you do the wrong thing, it makes you dumb? Anybody figure that out? That sin will make you stupid every time? So I decided, my parents always said, you were a good sinner in the sense that you did it a lot, but you were a bad sinner in the sense that you weren't good at it. And so I decided that I wanted all the money from having a paper route, but I didn't want any of the responsibility. So it's winter in Michigan. How many know what happens in spring to the snow? It melts. And also, if people don't get the paper they pay for, they tend to get upset. I buried weeks of papers under a snow mound over the course of the winter, and they started calling, and the newspaper people called me, and they're like, I have no idea what's happening. I have no idea where the newspapers are. It must be the storm. It must be whatever. Well, spring comes. Be sure your sin will find you out. And about 5,000 papers come from underneath this giant snowplow. Life is still defined by me. 100%. And unfortunately, how many figured out the older you get, the more serious that becomes, right? I made a friend named Jeremy. Hopefully you never had one of these bad chemistry friends. He and I together, he was more sinful than I was smarter than he was, put us together, and we could do all kinds of amazing things. So we started deciding we were going to bail on school all the time. I still remember one particular day, our principal's name was Dennis Maris, and I called him pretending to be my father. I should have chosen my mother. I hadn't gone through puberty yet. I called and I said, hello, Mr. Maris, this is Mr. Dorsey. I don't know how parents introduce themselves. I have no clue. Jeremy's standing by me going, good job, you're rocking this. You know, no clue at all. Finally, after about 2 minutes of me trying to buffalo my way through convincing them that JP doesn't need to come to school today because Mr. Dorsey thinks he's way too ill, he says, JP, will you get off the phone and just get to school? So I have no idea what to do. So I hand the phone to Jeremy and I'm like, you be mom. You know, he decides he's going to try to be mom. We do not convince him at all. We head to the mall for the day. We get home, we get in trouble. That's just life for a long time. But then all of a sudden things become more serious because relationships become involved. And when you get into relationships and they're all about you, those don't go well. And you leave a trail of hurt people. You get into activities that are all about you. And unfortunately, by the time I was 18 years old, I had been using since the time I was 11. Started doing coke when I was 13. Was on the state championship debate team, but showed up to my graduation not knowing whether I would walk or not, with my parents out in the audience. And things were not going well. So I graduated 92. March of 1993 moves forward, and some friends and I had made a little business venture with some people at Mardi Gras in New Orleans, and come back, and we were handling all of the stuff that we'd gotten there, and I became exposed to a bunch of drugs at the same time, and that's Thursday. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, my resting heart rate was about 150. And Sunday, I finally said, I'm going to die, and went to the emergency room. Still all about me. 19 years old, March 13th, 1993. I'd been raised in the church, and I knew I had a trail behind me of people who were damaged, who were broken, who were hurt, who were disappointed, because my life was still very small. It was still, the only question that mattered is like, how does this thing affect me? And I'm walking around in a circle in the emergency room. They said sit down, but I couldn't. My heart rate was just racing too fast. And the Lord spoke to me, first time I'd ever experienced God speaking to me in my life. And I don't know how it happened for you. Some of us, we come to the Lord and the Lord's just like, I love you, come and be with me, I love you. And some of us, the Lord's like, you know, I'm your father, I'm a comforter, I'm a redeemer, I'm a healer. For me, I think I had just been so ignorant of what God had told me to do. He came to me as a judge. And he said, JP, you're guilty, and if you die right now, you'll be separated from me forever. No piano playing softly in the background to make me feel better. Just me stuck in the middle of 150 beat per minute heart rate, thinking I'm going to die and that I'm now separated from God potentially forever. At that moment, my life took a significant expansion. It got bigger. I said to the Lord, and for the first time, I felt not just bad, not just guilty, but I felt honest remorse for the life that I had lived and for the way that I had treated people, for the wishing that I could undo what I had done, not because I didn't want people to find out about it, but because people were hurt and I violated God and hurt God and I had hurt other people. And so that's the first enlargement, right? The first bigger. My life gets bigger when all of a sudden you realize you're a part of God and His perspective on the world, and I'm a part of people, and I actually have some responsibility for the people around me. That's the first sort of loop that comes to place where I sort of, as you say here, cross the line to follow after Jesus and become part of Jesus' family. So, how many, when you became a Christian, you kind of assumed everything would become awesome? Yeah? Like, I became a Christian, I mean, I was on the wrong side, and so everything should be going wrong because I'm on the wrong side. But now I'm on the right side, and everything should be going amazing. I should get all the best jobs. I should never have cancer. I should never have diseases. I should never have any problems with my family. God's going to make everything okay because now I'm on God's side, and He loves me and He cares for me, and He's my parent and my God. And I assumed that as well. Unfortunately, the first year of my Christian walk was probably the hardest year of my life for two reasons. Two things were on my mind 24 hours a day. And the first was I was having anxiety attacks. So what started that kind of hyper heart rate that started those 3 days in March of 1993 continued. And not only that, but an ensuing paranoia. So I would go play golf with my dad, and I was just sure that someone had put drugs in the water container. I would go to drive down the road, and I was just sure that something was going to happen to me because I had such a bad emotional experience in the hospital. I was sure that that was going to happen again, and that feeling was so bad I never wanted to experience it again. Which having anxiety about having anxiety is not a good way to avoid anxiety. Anybody figure that out? I mean, it's like I could quit having anxiety if I could quit being anxious about having anxiety. And it's this sort of death spiral that you're in. Not only that, but that was supplemented by the fact that I just couldn't get my head wrapped around the fact God had forgiven me, but I just couldn't get my head around the fact that I was forgiven. I just couldn't get my head wrapped around that. So I'm having this anxiety, and the one that I need to help me with the anxiety is God, but yet I can't go to God because I feel guilty that God in the presence of God, so why would God help me? It is not a good place to be. And I remember I was driving down the road, and I was reading the Bible. The first 2 weeks I became a Christian, I read the entire New Testament. I just locked myself in my room. After I walked over to my buddy's house, in my sandals, we were kind of like hippies born out of time. So I had my Grateful Dead t-shirt on, and my beads, and my little round glasses, and my little Jesus sandals. And I walked down to the group of my friends, and they were all down in the basement doing what they did down in the basement. There's a cloud so thick, just like there was a cloud. Not the same cloud we sang about this morning. There was a cloud. I walked my way through, and I'm like, hey guys, I just want to let you know I'm not going to be seeing you again anytime soon. I'm following Jesus. And they looked at me like I was the one who was stoned. So I walked out, and that is kind of the experience that I'm having, where I'm having this anxiety, I'm having this kind of, I guess I would say condemnation, this sense that God couldn't forgive me. And I'm reading my Bible, and I came across Isaiah 23:6. It says, they that trust in you will have great peace. And I bet I quoted that verse. I looked it up in every translation, the Amplified, the NIV. I memorized it in every translation, and I probably quoted it 100 times a day. And I'm like, God, if this verse doesn't hold true, I'm going to go insane. And just said, God, I'm going to keep trusting you. I'm going to keep coming to you. And what was crazy is I would come to the Lord's presence, and I'd be like, God, if you're there and you're real and you've forgiven me, would you just give me a sense that I'm forgiven? And how many know when you do that, God does? Yeah. He gives you that sense that you're redeemed and you're forgiven. How many have gone right from that place to the next day feeling exactly the way you felt before you went into that place in the presence of God the day before? And it was like I had to go every day and say, Lord, I need a sense of your grace and your forgiveness. I need to know that your grace is bigger than my sin. That I'm not better at sinning than you are at forgiving. Like you're better than me and you're bigger than me. And so God and I walked through that for about a year. What's phenomenal about that is that I'm probably one of the least stressed people in my circle of friends at this point in my life. And I look back and I actually count it all to that year that I walked through, learning to trust that God would give His grace and would give His peace. That there was actually sort of a relationship there. My sense of God's grace and my sense of God's love got bigger. Then I trying to figure out, 19 years old, my previous plan had been to go to American University and study political science and become a political science professor. But every time I pick up a political science book, I just said the answer to every single one of these problems is Jesus. And I became very, very frustrated with political science at that point. I said, well, Lord, what do you want me to do in my life? And I played, weirdly enough, baritone. You know what the baritone is, right? It's like the mini tuba. It's like the tuba for people who aren't strong enough to carry the tuba. And I'm pretty sure that it's the geekiest part of the band. I'm pretty sure. And so I played baritone. So when I became a Christian, they had a symphony. We didn't have all of this. Right? At those times, we had like an orchestra. in church. And they said, will you play the baritone at church? I'm like, sure, I'll do anything. I mean, I got nothing but time. I just left all my friends, and I'm going crazy. You want me to play baritone? I'll do it. So I get up there and I play baritone, and I feel like God is maybe calling me to be into the ministry. And I'm sitting in this service. The guy at this church doesn't know me. There's about 600 people there. And I'd just become a Christian. He had just become the pastor. They thought I'd been a Christian for a long time because God just did such a work in my life. That's the one cool thing about being raised in the church is even if you're not a Christian when you're young, when you become a Christian, you have all of that to fall back on. You know a lot of the right things to do. A lot of that's already there. And I'm playing the baritone, and the guy stops in the middle of preaching. He was missing his first finger, so he always pointed with his middle finger, which was awkward in church. But he always did it. And he's preaching along, going along, and I'm like, God, you got to tell me I got to decide what I'm going to do with my life. I'm 19 years old. When you're 19 years old, how many know everybody that sees you asks you one thing? So what are you going to do? With everybody. And I'm like, God, I don't know. Just give me an answer. Lie to me. Anything. I don't care. Just give me an answer. And I felt like the Lord was calling me to ministry, but I'm like, God, I got to know. And this guy's preaching along, and I don't remember what he's talking about. He's talking about something totally non-related. He stops and he goes, you with a baritone. God's called you to ministry. And just turns around and keeps preaching. And I'm like, well, I guess that answers that. And so I decided to go on a missions trip. Ended up in Belarus with Mike Nagel, actually. Ended up being there, which is kind of a long-term connection there. And while I was there, I was told, now I'm a geek by nature. Even before I was a Christian, I'm a book reader. I had shelves and shelves of books before I was a Christian. And how many know God doesn't really change that after you become a Christian? You sort of have those same gifts. And I felt like I should go to college, which I think is appropriate. And I was in Russia, and the guy I was working with, who I really loved, said, you should go to this thing called Master's Commission. And I'm like, cool, what are their programs of study? Can I get a PhD there? And he's like, no, you're going to work like you're behind off and really serve, and no, there's really no education. I'm like, all right, sign me up, because I'm a young believer. I have no idea what I'm doing. Not that it's a bad thing, but it was an interesting fit for me. So I showed up there. How many, y'all know what human videos are? Yeah. You know what human videos are? Okay. So this place literally defined themselves by human videos. So like the cool people got to be Jesus in the human video. And if you were a girl and you were cool, you got to be like Mary or Martha or something, right? And everybody else was like the crowd. And I was like, man, I really want to be Jesus. Except that I had, again, young follower of Jesus, I had this idea that we shouldn't be representing Jesus in the flesh because it violated the commandment against idolatry. I'm a young believer. I'm just trying to read the Bible. I'm like, it says we shouldn't make any image of God. Here's Jesus. Now we're imitating God. We're idolaters. I can't be Jesus. So I'm totally conflicted. I want to be Jesus because he's the cool guy in the human video, but I can't be Jesus because I'd be an idolater and I'm not a good actor anyway. And I'm the worst fit on the planet for this program, period. I mean, I'm wanting to learn, I'm wanting to do education, I'm wanting to learn Greek and Hebrew, they're practicing human videos. It's not a good fit. They have a youth group of about 1,000 at that time. And how many know that you tend to process your relationship with Jesus through your own giftings? So if you are an intellectual person, you tend to process your relationship with Jesus through how you think about God. And you want to learn about God. If you're a relational person, you want to build relationship with God, you want to build relationship with other people that help you learn what God might be like. And if you are a kind of a doer, a lot of times we learn better by doing. And that flows into our relationship with God. And I had it all set. I'm an intellectual person, and I said, it's as simple. All we have to do is we preach truth, and people respond to the truth, and that's it. So I don't know what we're doing all this human video stuff for. I don't know what we're doing all this hugging and loving and eating food for. Let's just preach the gospel and see some people come to Jesus. That was the way I thought about it. So here I am in this youth group of 1,000 people. Clearly they're doing something right. All these students loving Jesus. But I have the answer. They need to stop doing everything that they're doing right then and start doing what I say they should be doing. 19-year-olds. And, but God had a very specific plan for me there, and that was to again make me bigger and realize that God works in very, very different ways in different people. Let me just have a show of hands here. For those of us who would identify as followers of Jesus here this morning, how many would say that your relationship with God has been very much like a relational one in the sense that you were introduced to God as Father or as someone who gave comfort to you or through a person who loved you? That's how your relationship with Jesus works. Cool. How many of us would say our relationship with Jesus functions a little more along ideas? We like to learn about God, and that influences us and how we think. Cool, just you and me, man. Oh, and you. All right, just a few of us geeks in the room. Okay, cool. And how many of us would say we're like doers? Like, actually, we experience more of the presence of Jesus, not when we're actually serving and when we're doing things for God. We're with the community of God. That's us. Cool. That's normal and that's natural. And God actually created it that way. We don't have time to talk about all that this morning. But my problem was I viewed my experience with God as the only way to experience with God. And all of a sudden I'm looking around, I'm going, wait a minute, there's all these teenagers crossing the line coming to follow Jesus. And why are they coming? They're not coming because someone is giving these incredibly eloquent sermons. They're coming because someone's loving on them, someone is hugging on them, someone is showing them what the love of Jesus is like. And all of a sudden Jesus makes me bigger. And I had been at the place before that where I would go. How many of you do not like funerals and weddings because you hate small talk? Small talk. Can we just put the weather up on the screen and let everybody know what it is and get on to talking about death? Okay, that's the rest of us. I hated small talk, but the Lord is like, JP, you've got to learn to love people. So I went through this whole process where I would literally have almost anxiety attacks before I'd go into a wedding because the Lord is like, JP, if you want to talk about the weather, you talk about the weather, but you're going to love everybody in that room. You're going to make eye contact with everybody in that room. You're going to love on everybody who is there. It doesn't matter what they want to do. So I got like apps on my phone that told me what the weather was, what the barometric pressure was, what the movies were, the sports scores. I don't care about sports at all this stuff, just so that I can learn to love people and talk to people. But I would literally have to stay on the parking lot and go, God, I need all your grace because I'm ready to have a panic attack. I don't want to go do this small talk. I don't want to do this at all. And I realized that it was a little bit of a me problem, and God made me bigger. And realized there's more than one way. And now, what the cool thing about that is now I feel like I can receive from God in that language too. Not only can I give in that language, but receive in that language. Then the final way, and this has been kind of an interesting dynamic for me, is that, and I almost hesitate to tell this story because, in America, we aggrandize big things, don't we? Like, we want things bigger. We want big companies, and we want big churches, and we want big ministries, and we want big followings, and we want big houses, big buffets. The hamburgers, is it just me or the hamburger is getting bigger and bigger, which is probably why I'm getting bigger and bigger. Everything is big. And so I hesitate to say it this way because how many know moving up isn't always success? Right? Moving, if that's even a thing, moving up. But God really pulled one over on me. My wife and I were pastoring, and we were pastoring this great church. And when we took it, the whole church was full of, it was a motley crew, to say the least. And it was great. We loved it. We had people who we had one lady in our church who, her husband had kept her in a doghouse in the backyard. And had her sister as his surrogate wife. It was like, but that was normal story for the kind of people that God had drawn to this church that we pastored. It was really incredible. And we loved it. And we felt like God had given us vision for that church. And my wife and I, we run 2 other businesses. And one of the guys in that business is a Methodist friend of mine. He's actually gone to be with the Lord now. And he called me one day. His name was Dr. Ken Brown. And I had been just unsettled. How many, you ever just feel that way? You just feel like the Lord is just, you don't know what it is. You can't put your finger on it, but there's just something. And so you're just listening. You're just saying, Lord, what's going on? And I remember I was just listening. And I felt like the Lord said, JP, I want you to be involved with training people for ministry. Now you have to understand, I don't have the greatest track record with hearing from the Lord. You know these people that are like, I woke up this morning, the Lord was like, brush your teeth. Now walk out the door, take 2 steps to the right. Do you know these people? I'm not one of those people, okay? I'm one of those people who's walking along and the Lord's like, hello, listen, that's me. And I had this experience where I was trying to hear from the Lord. Before that, I went to a district council, which is a big event where all of our pastors and leaders go to, and I was trying to hear from the Lord what the Lord wanted me to do. And anybody ever get the idea, like if the Lord isn't speaking to you, maybe he'll speak to somebody else for you? So I decided to go to respond to the altar call and get as close as I could to the speaker and pray as loudly and as pathetically as I could in hopes that he would hear me and come to me and pray for me and hear from the Lord for me. Have you ever done this? Sure. Sure, thank you. One honest person, thank you. So I'm up at the front and I'm praying. I'm like, oh God, help me, And he's moving, so I'm shimmying down the altar, trying to stay close to him. And finally, it's only me and him in the sanctuary. Everybody else has left. And he walks up to me. I can hear him. I can feel him coming up to me and pray for me. And I'm just sure he's going to give me a word from the Lord. He puts his hand on my back and he says, Lord, would you bless JP? And walks out of the room and leaves me alone in the sanctuary. So at this point, I'm not expecting the Lord to talk to me ever again. But I ended up in our sanctuary just by myself praying. I felt like the Lord said, JP, I want you to be involved with training people for ministry. And wow, did my heart get bigger. Previous to that, you have to understand, we had been offered, my wife and I have been offered a position at a church serving college students. And I said, I don't even like college students. Why would I want to do that? That was my response. So I work with college students now, and I love it. It's probably the most rewarding season of ministry ever in my life. But I think the thing that I want to say this morning is that what the Lord is always doing in our lives, whether it's first calling us to himself and making us bigger than our immediate needs, making us bigger than our immediate desires, whether it is bringing us through an incredibly uncomfortable season where we are put through trials, whether it's sickness, whether it's a relational challenge, financial challenge, whatever it is. And how many know I hate those seasons? I'll just be honest. I'm like, Lord, no, not again, please. But I will just tell you, how many come to the backside of those and you are a different person? And in all the good ways if you listen. And it's so rewarding that God is trying to make us bigger. And then we meet people and we come into a community like this. And have y'all figured out that not everybody at church is just like you? You figure that out? And some of those people that we don't want to be with, like I didn't want to be at the Master's Commission with all the huggy people. I wanted to be with the geeky people, but I was there doing human videos with the huggy people. And I learned, and I realized God was bigger than my gifts and my perspective. And then all of a sudden you're just walking along and God says, I'm calling you to something that's bigger. And again, bigger doesn't have to be up on the spectrum. God is always calling us to something new. That the call of God, I think, is to a plasticity in ourselves. And to come before the Lord and say, Lord, whatever it is you want to do, I just want to continually grow in my view of you. That you are more loving than I ever dared dream. That you're more gracious than I ever dared imagine. That you're more complex and creative in the way that you interact with people than I ever could have processed all by myself. And that you are more forgiving and you're more empowering than I ever could have imagined. That we discover over and over again that God that is bigger. And now I'm in another season. And I will close with this because perhaps it's maybe where some of you are at. How many know it's easy to talk a big game about death until you're dying? Even in light of our faith, right? And I think many people experience what I would call a period of faith adjustment when they're faced with mortality. We have enough faith for when death is over here, but all of a sudden death comes here, and the faith that we had for death being over here doesn't feel like enough. Anyone know what I'm talking about? And all of a sudden our faith has to come to a new level to accommodate the closeness and proximity that's there. And my mother, like all of us, and anyone in here I'm sure could tell similar stories. My mother 6 years ago was diagnosed with a mucosal melanoma, which is an internal melanoma. And at that time, the 5-year survival rate for her particular cancer was 0. No one had ever lived 5 years with it. And we found ourselves in a surgery room, and again, I know probably everybody in here has a similar story. And everything was supposed to go great, like it always is, right? We like to be optimists, and the surgeon came out, and he said, I'll come back and talk to you in about an hour, but we might have a choice to make. We may either need to take her eyes, and we can probably buy her some time, or leave her eyes, and maybe she might have 6 months. Something like that. And, wow, all of a sudden, what was over here marched right up to here. And my faith was only for here. And there was this moment where I felt like, if I can be crass, I was caught with my faith down. That my faith didn't match the situation. And now, I'm pleased to say, she's had an 18-hour surgery. At 72 years old, she had an 18-hour surgery, which is amazing. She's had a bunch of surgeries since then. They're now doing reconstructive surgery. They pulled off part of her skull, went into the top of her sinuses. She's a mess right now to look at because she's got to go through some reconstruction. But she's going on to year 7, and they're saying she's cancer-free. But all that to say, to me the big deal there isn't, it's awesome that she's cancer-free, but we've all picked up that everybody that becomes cancer-free still dies, right? I mean, it's awesome when the Lord gives us a new lease on life and the Lord re-energizes us, but we're still in this mortal body. And when I was praying on the way here this morning and just kind of thinking as we were in worship, I said, through this process, and I'm not there yet, still when I think about this new proximity that mortality has to my life, being close through my mother and father, and I know some of us have already experienced the loss of parents, we're thinking about our own mortality. That I feel like I'm in this process that I need God to get bigger again. Like I had a big enough view of God for over here, but now I need a bigger view of God for what's going on in my life right now. For you, maybe this morning, maybe it's not death, maybe it's you've never experienced a financial situation where you're in, or you thought your marriage was awesome, and all of a sudden it's come to a place where you realize it was not what you thought. You and your spouse are in chaos. And you're saying this morning, that's what I need. I need God to become bigger. I just need Him to become bigger. I don't have the solution emotionally. I don't have the solution intellectually. I can't gather enough friends around me to make me feel okay. I just need God to be bigger. And I'm just going to ask this real quick. We're not going to do any big altar response or anything like that, but if you just close your eyes just for a second and you say, that perfectly describes my situation. There's a situation going on in my life that is completely unexpected. And I feel like I trusted God before, but now that the situation is up close, I feel like my faith needs to rise to the occasion. God is making me bigger, but I'm in that process. And not just covet prayer this morning. If that's you, could you just slip up your hand just real quick? And I was like, cool, a whole bunch of us. Cool. Go ahead and slip it back down. And I'd just like to pray, Jesus, you know where we're at this morning. You hold our lives in your hands. And just like that preacher turned around and pointed at me and said, you were the baritone, you are just as miraculously present in those moments where we're in process as you are in those moments that are just full of power. So Jesus, I'm just asking you that you would do what you promised in John. By your Spirit, you would speak to your people about Jesus. Magnify Jesus. Show us how all-encompassing your grace is. How transcendent your grace is. How tangible your grace is to us here on earth. If there's those of us here this morning that would say, I haven't even crossed that first line yet. I haven't even really come to a place where I believe in Jesus. I trust in Jesus. Jesus, would you hear even that little whisper of a cry in the heart that says, could it be? And Jesus, would you reveal yourself with such clarity, such power, and such grace, that you would gently take us into your arms, to your kingdom. We'd find ourselves gently slipping from unbelief to maybe belief to I do believe. Would you do that, Jesus? We ask this morning in your wonderful name.